Hi everyone, Justin Campbell here from Liberty Works. I've got with me Andrew Cooper, President of Liberty Works, and
Hey,
uh, we
Justin.
just hey, how you going? We're just discussing the same-sex marriage plebiscite. Obviously, the biggest story today, and you feel free to comment, and we'll reply to your comments if they come on. So, Andrew, what are your initial thoughts of the results today?
Oh, for God's sake, thank God it's over. Justin? um, I think there are reasons that we ended up where we are or where we did, and there's a bit of water to go under the bridge now, but at least there's some progress. But I mean, my goodness, it's just such an example of how difficult it is to change legislation once it's enshrined somewhere. It's a very
Yeah.
good argument not to have legislation to begin with.
That's right. That's right. So you recently wrote a open letter to Conservatives, basically calling for the state getting out of marriage, and you had a lot of people who really loved that article, and you had other people who didn't like it. So do you want to sort of summarise what your position on it all is?
Well, I mean, so the Marriage Act was introduced in 1961. So that was the federal legislation that was designed to replace state-based legislation that prevailed. It was fairly similar in all the states, but some of the states were a little bit different to others. For example, I think it was Queensland and Tasmania up until the late 50s allowed 12-year-old girls and 14-year-old boys to marry. And some of the other states wouldn't allow that. They raised the age of consent to a higher level. So the idea was that the Marriage Act of 1961 would be the definitive document on marriage, and conservatives loved this. It was introduced by one of the Menzies governments, and conservatives piled on board because you know what? It's very attractive, isn't it, Justin? It's very
Yeah.
attractive to have the government tell everyone else to lead their lives the way that we lead our lives. It's an attractive proposition. And at the end of the day, it was very popular. I mean, 1961 Australia was a very conservative place. And when
Yeah.
things are popular, the temptation is to introduce and impose the popular will on everyone. So the
It is
legislation
very
arrived. Go
It is
on.
very interesting though that they left the option to marry your first cousin as one
Yep.
of the things that you could legally do in the in the legislation. So there obviously was a constituency there of people who were
Yep.
married to the first cousin that they didn't want to upset.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's the thing about popularity, isn't it? It changes, you know. But the trouble is, legislation doesn't change; it's enshrined, and so it's very difficult to change legislation. And conservatives, based on the popularity of conservatism, and based on the popularity of their definition of marriage in 1961, harnessed the power of government and imposed the will on everyone. They told all states, your legislation is no longer valid. They told everyone that there's one definition of marriage, there's one marriage act, and everyone must comply with this.
Yes, yeah,
And so that, and I can understand why that would have excited conservatives. Um,
yeah,
because it imposes on everyone that one definition, and they would have felt that it was a good thing. But the trouble with legislation, as you and I know, and the trouble with the power of government
yeah,
is whatever government gives you can be easily taken away. And government is not a police. It's not it doesn't police morality. Government is
no,
amoral.
mm,
Um, Government has no soul. It has no feelings. And what's happened now is that conservatives are very upset because they
yes,
see that
yeah,
government has been taken away from them. and now others are going to impose their will on them about what marriage means.
Yes,
And you
and
know what?
that's inevitable.
It is
It
inevitable,
seems
isn't
like
it?
the Dean Smith legislation will have very few protections for people to say no, to not have someone else's version of marriage forced upon them. Very much strictly limited to churches and things like that. So the right of people to discriminate most likely won't end up being protected. So yeah, you're exactly right that the best solution was to not have government involved. And
Well,
but
I'm hoping this is a lesson for all of us. Basically, is that when you co-opt government to get your wish or push the will of popular thinking through yesterday, then there's a very good chance that today government is going to be harnessed by another group that will push through their will. And one of the
yeah,
arguments that Conservatives ran, of course, was that this was a minor issue. It wasn't very popular. Well, the survey, the great big survey that we had to have has shown that, in fact, it's quite popular. It is the popular
yes,
view. And
they
now
always
I would hope that Conservatives, I would
they
hope
always
Conservatives
say
would
that.
reflect on
They
this.
said that about 18C as well. They always say that when they don't want to talk about an issue that's inconvenient for them, that it's a minor issue, no one cares about this. And you're right, they said it about same-sex marriage, they've said it about other issues, and often when they're saying that, and it might be true, not everyone cares about it, but just because a majority of the population doesn't care about something doesn't mean that that's a right not to reform something to give people more liberty in their life.
Yeah, well, look, I agree, but I think the greatest reform we could do would be repeal the Marriage Act.
Yeah.
Repeal it. Get rid of it. There's no need for it. I mean, when a couple, a devout couple, walk down the aisle, are they really thinking that, oh, it's nice to have the government, validate our marriage with the Marriage Act of 1961? Of course not. The reason they're going down the aisle is it's a marriage between, them, their families, and presumably their God. And that's all that matters. There's no need for government to be involved in this thing at all.
Mm.
And the trouble is, once government is involved, of course, then there's the risk that government will be co-opted by another group that will change it. And that's what's happened. Now, for me, that's not a bad thing. But I think everyone's will can be, or everyone's desires can be satisfied by repeal of the Act.
Yeah, yeah. I have a hard time seeing it happening anytime soon, but I do agree with the position. I having just been married recently, I mean, I found the state's involvement in the marriage quite intrusive. Even as a heterosexual couple, things like they're recommending counselling to you. That there's certain words that have to be said in the ceremony. It just is all. Like, piss off. It's not your wedding.
Pissed off.
Yeah. And, it's very intrusive. Now, one thing I'd like to talk about is the results, because we've now got this bizarre situation. One thing that having the plebiscite has done is told us about what's going on in the Australian electorates, which is the Western Sydney electorates are now more conservative than regional Queensland. So you're a central Queensland boy, aren't you? And so
A
your
long time ago, but yes. Yep.
your hometown, and my family's hometown of Rockhampton is less conservative than Western Sydney. And I remember getting a few strange looks when I walked into one of the bars in Rockhampton wearing a purple shirt. So yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, no, well, it is there is a little bit of a it's a funny old, isn't it? You've got many Labor seats voting majority no, and yet they've been very vocal in their support. And you've got many Conservative seats voting yes, and then you've got Western Australia, for example. I think the entire state voted yes. So there's no seats there. There's no seats there, and I think that surprised a lot of people. But coming from the country, I think country people have a suspicion of things being rammed down their throat, and so they can be reactionary. But you know what? The attitude of giving people a fair go prevails out in the bush, and I think that's what's happened here. Is I think a lot of people, they see that same-sex couples haven't been given a fair go, and whilst most of us aren't heavily invested in this issue, I think most of us think, these people deserve a fair go, and I think that would be some reason for the vote that's happened out in the bush.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly a possible, maybe not surprising, but it would have surprised a lot of people that the results were as pro in some areas as what they were. And of course, you had Andrew Hastings, his seat in WA voted very much in favour of yes.
Tony Abbott's seat.
Yeah, and then you've got the Labor seats who voted no. So, often when there's
Tony Burke's seats,
you've got these contentious bills. They always say, "Oh, went and spoke with my electorate. I had the sense, and this is what people told me." So people should always suspect that when politicians say that, it's bullshit. That's
right. It is. Yep.
Representative democracy is always a poor substitute for liberty. If you can have a politician voting on something, or you can just have the freedom to live your life, always choose the freedom to live your life, because they clearly don't know what their electorate think, and they're not terribly interested.
And I think this is part of the problem that we're going to encounter soon, is that there are advocates for same-sex marriage that actually they're not that interested in the freedom issue. What they're more interested in, and many Conservatives smell this. They know they can smell a rat, but some of the advocates are more interested in using this issue as a wedge, as a way to drive.
Looks like we've lost Andrew there. He's frozen up. We'll see if his computer has unfreezes, but at the moment he's locked up. Now this might be a good time there's a few people watching. Do you have any questions? Do you have anything you want to say? I've got the ability to put comments on the screen if you've got a view that you'd like heard. Now's a good time. Okie doke. So far nothing. Okay, sounds like Andrew's back.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
I'm back, baby. Fantastic.
Sounds like you're on that good NBN.
That's right. Oh, the bloody NBN. Anyway.
Yes.
Where were we? We were pontificating about something, weren't we?
Yeah. So, about how people were using this issue as a wedge.
Yeah, look, I think there is a genuine concern about how this issue will be used in the future. But whilst I don't agree that this is the best way to introduce freedom, and I'm sure you don't either, Justin. I don't think we agree this is necessarily the best way in how to make people freer around the marriage issue. It's an incremental step in the right direction, still based in legislation. The issue that really is is of concern to probably most of us, or many of us, is what next? How is this going to enable the cultural Marxists to introduce some of the programs that they're working very hard to introduce? And, I think there's some genuine concerns, but in my mind, they're separate issues. They shouldn't be bundled up together. What do you think?
They are separate issues, and I think the No case did themselves a real disservice by combining them. And my people I know who don't follow politics very closely just thought, what are they going on about with the safe school stuff? Like to the person on the street, there was no connection between the two. Now, a lot of us who are a lot closer to it know that actually a lot of the same people are advocating the same things, and it's part of, perhaps a bigger agenda to sort of redefine society. But yeah, I mean, the No campaign really did themselves a massive disservice, not just arguing the issue.
Yeah, I think so. But, that's campaigning. At the end of the day, we've got a result. We need to see how the implementation of that result finally comes through. James Patterson's put out a 60, 70, God knows how many pages it was, 80-page bill as his proposed solution. And, James is pretty solid. He's a freedom-loving senator. But my goodness, he's going to add to those 6,000 pages of legislation that he railed against that goes through the Parliament every year. And I'm just wondering whether we should be looking at more, simple pieces of legislation. But
there's the Linehelm. There was the Linehelm one, wasn't there? Which was very
simple. David Linehelm. Yeah, very simple. Yeah, very simple and clean. Extended the same-sex marriage rights to those couples, and didn't diminish or extend any of the other laws of the land. So I'm not sure why they're not looking at that. Probably because it's not a Liberal Party. He's a classical Liberal in the Liberal Democrats, not a Liberal Party member. So
definitely, that it very much is like they won't back a bill that's not their own. That unfortunately, that's just how the Senate works. Very rarely one might get up, but they'll release almost exactly the same legislation, but it will come from one of their own people. That's how it works. But I mean, the Patterson bill, I mean, like you said, I mean, I'm usually a really big fan, but I haven't read the full thing, but I've read some of it, and it's like trying to redefine other laws within that law. It just seems like really sloppy, poor law writing. So I really don't know what he was thinking with that.
No. Well, maybe we'll ask James.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's been asked.
Yeah.
So
let's
get him on. Let's ask him.
I think actually that went down so poorly that now everyone's just jumped on the Smith bill, and where it's really weakened any criticism of the Smith bill, because it's kind of created two camps. You're either with this crazy, overly complex bill that tries to control, alter other laws within this piece of legislation and what have you. That you're either in that camp or you're in the Dean Smith camp, and it was a poor move, I think.
Now, let me ask you something. Do you think the Liberal Party have handled this well?
That's good. No,
all
not
the political.
Really.
You don't? Okay, it's interesting, isn't it?
I'm
a bit torn because they were getting wedged by Labor and the left, and they've pulled the solution out of. I think there's Matt Canavan actually that proposed a solution some months back and was laughed at. But they sort of pulled it out of nowhere, and I think they've surprised everyone. And I'm sort of curious now.
Sorry, in that respect, yes, the sneaky postal plebiscite move, it And all the polls show the Australian people support it. So you've got lots of people saying, "Oh, it's violence against us. People are going to kill themselves." Blah blah blah. But all the polls show that the majority of people actually wanted their say. And I was speaking with someone who's a Christian, very conservative, today about this, and she was upset about the result. But in the end, I said, you got your chance to have a say. You were they wanted to stop you having your say. They wanted to just pass it through Parliament where people like her wouldn't get a chance to have any input to it. But now they've had their say and they've lost. They're only right there. They're 35. What is it? 35% of the population. 36. They lost. So they're going to have to accept that now. But they've had their go.
One of the greatest pieces of advice I ever got in business was from a mentor who said, when discussing, say strategy or goal setting with team members in a company, is that at the end of the day, his advice was, look, not everyone can get their way, but everyone deserves their say. And I've always felt that that's such a powerful, it's a powerful phrase, because as long as everyone gets a chance to their voice forward, often they can accept the result in a democracy. And I think it sort of begs the question: do we want more of these, or do we want less of them? I mean, if we want more of them, for God's sake, surely we can make it cheaper. But it is interesting, isn't it? It's an interesting.
That's the most disappointing for me, is so many people are down on the idea of holding plebiscites. If anything, it shouldn't have taken sort of like this sneaky move by the government to make it happen, because politicians have the ability to put bills in Parliament all the time. What we have is, for years they were kicking this can down the road. It should have been a case of people passionate about this issue having a mechanism to petition Parliament to force a plebiscite and having a citizen-initiated referenda. And we should be having them on everything.
Maybe. I'm not convinced one way or the other, but I have been surprised at how well this appears to have gone down in the end. So I think there's some lessons. I'm not entirely convinced what those lessons are yet, but
it's
interesting.
It's early days. Look, a lot of people, it did get nasty at times. I was disappointed, to be honest, that it got as nasty as what it did. I hoped people were better than that. But I still believe in plebiscites as an idea, and unfortunately in politics people do get nasty. It's just one of those things, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I wonder what the lessons are learnt for conservatives, and I wonder what that cultural Marxist aspect to the Yes campaign. I wonder what they're thinking right now.
Yeah,
what's next, or they're just happy.
They're probably happy, but I mean, if we look overseas, where it has been made law, there's been a lot of sort of finding the one Christian baker in town, and and those kind of activist tactics, and unfortunately, there's an element. You create these laws to protect people from being humiliated and being discriminated against, but unfortunately they become weapons in the hands of in activists. And you have people who, for whatever reason, they have the beliefs they have, and next thing you know, their lives are getting ruined because they won't write a message on a cake, which is what happened in the UK, and they lost that case. Even the Guardian came out and said that the law got it wrong on that one.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think if you're if you were a same-sex couple, I wonder whether you'd really want to take your business to someone that would like to discriminate against you. But if that's illegal, how will you know who wants to discriminate against you? How do you know where to take your business to people who support your lifestyle? And so if it becomes legal to discriminate, then it removes choice. It removes individual choice to take their business take their their purchasing power to the business of their choice, because they don't know. It's all been clouded by the law. And I think this is the thing, isn't it? That at the end of the day, if free speech is driven underground, and it removes lots of choice, and it removes the ability for people to fight against it. So I'm hoping that there are carve-outs. One thing that does annoy me, Justin, is the carve-outs are only centred around religious freedoms. I mean, for God's sake, what if you're agnostic or atheist, or don't you discriminate in any way that you want as well? Why are these carve-outs just focused on religious freedoms?
Yeah, and this is the problem. This is Helen Dale said the other day that fighting anti-discrimination law is not a hill that she's willing to die on, and to a certain extent, I kind of feel she might have a point there. It's a bit like people who want to reduce the welfare state, and they talk about abolishing the age pension. That it's probably
maybe we won't die on that hill. Yeah, maybe we won't die on that hill, but certainly we can show a video cast. It's worthy of discussion, and I think with some of these issues, people don't think through the. All they see is the negative. Oh well, if you remove anti-discrimination laws, that just gives you the right to discriminate. But it's more than that. It takes away. It actually takes away the ability for people who are discriminated against to identify who is discriminating them and to go elsewhere. So it's not just a one-way street with some of these things.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, I used to work in employment services. Anti-discrimination law doesn't work, and there's plenty of people being discriminated against every day, and you'd never be able to prove it. And only an idiot would get caught discriminating. And unfortunately, people think that I can take, if they don't get a job, they can go to Fair Work or what have you, and the truth is, the government's not going to do anything unless you've got a smoking gun. These things are just there to all it does is put discrimination underground. It's very similar to the free speech issue.
Well, and also it means that people won't take a risk with people they suspect they may have issues with. So, we're getting into a bit of a rabbit hole here, but if the costs of employing say a mid-20s female may increase because they may have a baby later on, there's no doubt that self-interest comes into the employment process, and that they will be discriminated before they even get into the business. There's no doubt, because that's self-interest. But anyway, let's leave that for another day. I noticed Nicola Wright just left a message on the screen saying that the Patterson bill's been canned.
I'll bring that back up.
I hadn't seen that, actually. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I brought it up before. So, yeah. The Patterson bill has been canned anyway, and he's now backing the Dean Smith. So there you go. Even he doesn't believe in his bill anymore. So we've lost Andrew. We'll see if he comes back. But I'm happy to take any questions or comments or. I've had a few already. That's great. So if you want to write something in the comments section, we're here to. So going down a bit, I'll just bring up Nick's comment from before about issue-based direct democracy is the way to go. So, yeah, I mean, personally, I would like to see more plebiscites, and just like they do in Switzerland, lots of plebiscites on all kinds of issues. But to me, I'll just put my own position that democracy is always the poor cousin of liberty. So if people can have freedom over their own life, that should be the first point. So because democracy is just what 51% of people think, and unless there's some issues where we need to cooperate and we need common agreement on, but there's a lot of issues where the government creates laws and it's just the people, one group of people bossing another group of people around, and so that's my position. So unless there actually needs to be a law about it, I prefer they not make it. Doesn't look like Andrew's coming back. He's got a pretty choppy internet connection there. Just so sort of last opportunity for any more comments. We've got a decent viewership tonight, which is fantastic. Well, looks like that's it. So I might wrap it up. Thank you for your attention tonight. Yeah, really wonderful. Congratulations. And also, I guess for those people who have been waiting a long time to get married, I've met a couple of people who have been together before I even met my wife. In that time, I've been able to get married, and they've still been waiting. So congratulations. Of course, the law hasn't passed yet, but for those people who are anxiously waiting to get married, I would, congratulations. And to be honest, as a libertarian, I'd just get married anyway, and don't worry about what the government tells you, what's right and wrong. All right, everyone, have a great night. Speak to you later. Bye.